Here at the Independence Reformed Bible Church, we do allow for questions following the service. Who has the first question?
In Joshua with the AI, wasn't part of the reason that God may not have moved is because they broke faith in regards to devoted things? So
that's the reason why they initially lost. But when they solved that problem, they still didn't get a miracle like they got at Jericho.
Yeah.
And which was to point out to them that this is the way it's going to be. And even later on, you might recall, Tim, where it says later in Joshua they handled the hill people, but they couldn't handle the valley people because they had chariots. Well, that'd be a good time for a miracle, right? Just take care of the chariots, but no more miracles. So yeah, you're exactly correct. It wasn't, at least initially, it wasn't the lack of miracles. It was that they had disobeyed God in the, as it says, the accursed thing. But ultimately, and the only miracle that I know of after that, in the entire conquest of Canaan, was the sun standing still. That's the only one I know of. And even that was a miracle sort of done in the course of the job they were already doing. My concern often is that we want a miracle because we want to actually trade in what we're supposed to do and don't want to do it and want it to happen miraculously. And intrigues me that's the only one that I know of. We have other ones we have other miracles, if you will, Balaam's donkey, miraculous, but that wasn't really germane to what what their job actually was. And even Balaam's donkey, that occurred even in the course of what they were supposed to be doing anyway, doing their jobs. I would hope that if any of us experience miracles, it'd be a wonderful thing, that we would experience any kind of miracle in the course of doing our job, in the course of obeying God.
Miracles aren't really. We're asking for miracles for us. Miracles happen.
Indeed. And we should be living in such a way that God gets the glory for the miracle, or he gets the glory for the lack of miracle. Either way. That's a question, yeah.
Yeah, I just have a question about, do you have like your specific definition of a miracle? You know what I mean? Because I hear, these good stories about, a pastor or whatever. They give everything. They give money. They're broke. They give money to this person. Then, a check for $2,000 shows up in the mail. You know what I mean? Like because of their faith or whatever. Like, is that a miracle, or are you just talking about a dramatic miracle?
Actually, that's a lie. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but it just seems like these people get money from other people are never short on those kind of amazing stories. And
it's not just those stories. I mean,
yeah.
not just about money.
Well, in the modern sense, though, it's hard to talk about people that are working miracles and they don't talk about money at some point. And the reason why I said what I said, sort of in jest, but not so much, is because I always get concerned when you're appealing to people's covetousness and greed, if you will, and turn that into an idea of how you're supposed to obey God. That concerns me. In other words, obey God, send me money, obey God, and then you'll be rich like me. That's always a big concern. But to your greater question, how do we even define a miracle? Okay, I want to talk about that just briefly. Miracles are hard to define, I would argue this way, because natural is hard to define. It's one of the hardest words to define. We have a problem even defining, what is natural? A person lives to be 105 years old. Is that natural? Is that a miracle? Anybody know? Somebody else dies at 50. Is that natural? See how hard it is even to define natural? So, if we can't define natural, we can't define supernatural. Make sense? You have to define natural before you can define supernatural, and when it comes to supernatural, now we're in the area of miracles. So when it comes to defining a miracle, first of all, I'm willing to say that the Bible defines miracles when it says a miracle occurred. Now, another question we must ask. I knew of a young man who lost his eyesight. He had a fork stuck in his eye when he was very young, and for most of his life, till he got to his, I believe, late teens, early 20s, college, he could only see dark and light. That was it, no objects. His parents are here today. I can talk to you about this. Discovered that found out there were 2 doctors in the world who could actually fix this problem and give him his eyesight back in his eye. One of the doctors was in South Africa. The other doctor was in Exton, Pennsylvania. Miracle? I don't want to say it's not. Was it a miracle this doctor could fix someone's eye like that? Is that a miracle? I want to tell you something. 200-300, we say, well, no, it's not a miracle because the doctor did this, he sewed, he did a lens and so forth. We say that's not a miracle. But 300 years ago, if a doctor could do that, would they say it was a miracle? Yeah, you bet they would. Yes, you would. So my definition of a miracle is whatever the Bible says it is in that context and in that history. Beyond that, it's pretty hard to define. At least for me. Another question.
Joel, I was just wondering if you'd be willing to maybe qualify or just explain or a little better, or maybe I just didn't catch it right. But I agree that when you're looking at poverty and those that are poor, we need to engage them with the gospel, just like those standing in front of Planned Parenthood. We need to engage them with the gospel because you can get someone to save a baby's life, but if the person doesn't come to Christ, you've got it. Same thing with the gospel. We can bring people food, but if they don't know Christ, it's I understand that. But when I read Proverbs like 19:17, whoever is generous to the poor lends to the Lord, and He will repay him for his deed. And then Isaiah 1:17 says, learn to do right, see that justice is done, help those who are oppressed, give orphans their rights, and defend the widows. 1 Corinthians 10, and it just goes on and on. And that one, there's a lot of examples of being generous. And I think I understand what you're saying, but I also want to make sure that we don't walk away from here thinking that giving to the poor is wrong, because I really believe that while we don't just want to send a check, we want to make sure we're engaging them with the gospel, but I want to make sure that's what you're saying. So
Sure. Glad you asked that, because I would like to explain that. I remember becoming conscious of this, shall we say, in my early 20s, or perhaps mid-20s. And let me see if I can explain this a little bit. As I read, especially a passage I go to an awful lot, Deuteronomy 4, where God says to the children of Israel, you guys are going to implement my laws, and the nations surrounding you guys are going to say, wow, this God is really, really close to you. Well, how is this bounty, if you will, that the children of Israel had, how's it actually going to be spread to the other nations? It was not going to be spread to the other nations by them, shall we, exporting their wheat crop necessarily to the other poor nations. They were going to see what it's like to love and serve Christ as a nation. We had the same problem. Those of you that are my age can remember the whole Cold War thing, right? And I don't know if you remember these discussions that happened in the 70s and 80s, but some of you may remember there were big discussions here in the U.S. about whether or not we should export wheat to the Soviet Union. How many remember those battles over that? Oh yeah, should we? And there were people who said, no, look, they're communists. What are they going to do with the wheat? Other people said, the people are starving. We should send them wheat, right? What did not come into the discussion was this. Before those bloody men took over the Soviet Union, they actually occupied it was called the breadbasket of the world, the Ukraine. It was the breadbasket of the world. And by the time the communists were done, they had it turned into a desert, for Pete's sake. And what was frustrating to me at the time, sort of circling back to your question here, was frustrating to me at the time was that no one would talk about that. No one would say, you know what? These are godless people. They're wicked people. They've taken the breadbasket of the world, and now they're starving to death. Never even got into the discussion. So now the rest of us have to try to figure out how do we help. Yes, throughout the scriptures, we are to help the poor. No doubt about it. No doubt. The Good Samaritan doesn't come along and say, you know what, guy in the ditch, if you were in better shape, and if you would have taken karate classes from Sid, he definitely helps them. We help them too. But what I want to communicate clearly, and I want to give you a chance to come back on this, what I want to communicate clearly is we just don't stop with the handouts. And we challenge those who are oppressing the people that we're trying to help. Give you another quick example. Africa. Africa is the most fertile continent in the world by far. Prior to the communist takeover of South Africa and Rhodesia, those two countries fed sub-Saharan Africa. Now they're net importers of food, at least Rhodesia is. Zimbabwe's a complete mess, and South Africa's getting there soon. Rhodesia, Mugabe there, has chased out all the farmers. He's given the land to his buds, and they're starving to death. The South Africans, under Jacob Zuma now, another communist, are looking over across the river at Zimbabwe now and saying, they have a really good land program. We're going to adopt their program. What do you think South Africa's going to have? So in other words, we, in our discussions, we say, we need to help these folks, and we do need to help them. But how? That's my question. How? Are we supposed to stand by and just say, tisk, tisk, too bad the Zimbabweans just are having a hard time here. It's just too bad that they have a famine. Or should we say, no, you used to be net exporters. You used to have people coming to you for food. Now you've cursed Christ, and it's a complete disaster. See, that is the part of discussion that I see that we're missing. You can go on and on with this. China. Read about Mao's takeover of China and what happened, the starving that took place. And what I'm saying this morning is that if we really want to help people, yes, we help them with what we can give. But it just doesn't stop there. We help them with what we give, yes, but we also give them the gospel, we give them God's law, and we give them the means to be productive just as we were given it. I remember seeing a map of what land was productive. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but this continent was seen as very unproductive. Did you know that? This continent was seen as a place that could not sustain people. Why can it sustain people? Well, it was one time seen that it couldn't do that. Read about the Indians who chased the buffalo around, many of them starving to death. What really could help them? A lot of food from Europe? Or teaching them how to farm? God's ways. Does that help?
Yeah, clarity that giving was not wrong.
Oh.
That giving the gospel with giving is not just a check or just
Yeah, the key word is not just. And I hear a lot of we just give them this stuff, and you're not really helping them. I would argue, and I think we've missed opportunities here in the West by pointing out that these countries that are starving, that there's reasons why they are. And I think we've missed that opportunity.
And I didn't think it should.
No. No. I do not, and Paul was very clear on that. He took an offering from all the churches in Asia Minor to send to Jerusalem because of the famine there. And it was a good thing and a right thing. Another question.
No, I just say that's why welfare is wrong, because God's not getting the glory. As long as God gets the glory, yeah. But we can't even hand out water bottles with a Bible verse on it. I mean, we're not giving God the glory, and that's why it's wrong. If countries do it, they aren't believers. Country is an inanimate object. Believers are people, face to face, hand it from one hand to another hand. So.
Yeah. I might surprise you here. I do believe in welfare. But state-sponsored welfare is not welfare. It's theft. That's why the state wants to be in charge. That's why they love this welfare thing, because they get to be the giver of grace. And the church and the family are the ministers of grace, not the state. The state is the minister of justice. But they want to be the minister of grace, and yet, if you've noticed, the more they minister grace, the less they minister justice. Yeah, the Bible's all for welfare. Church, family, welfare. We didn't see Paul going to the state. We didn't see Paul going to Caesar, hey, give me some money so we can help the church at Jerusalem. No, he went to the church and got the money. I might have mentioned this before, forgive me if I have. John stopped me on these. Katrina. Did I mention this one? I'm sorry.
There's so many.
Katrina, a friend of mine, loaded up a trailer with a couple friends of his, went down to minister to Katrina. And he came back, he said, you know what I saw? He said, you know what I saw out there helping people? It was all churches. All churches. So there were people there with equipment, and they were just working. Went to a local church, and people were gathering at this local church, and this pastor was tuned into the needs of the community, and he knew who needed what, and who could help with what, and it was all the church getting it done in Katrina. But what did we hear about? We heard about FEMA, as if the whole thing was going to fall apart except for FEMA. And I asked my friend, I said, what was FEMA doing? You know what he told me? He said, oh, it's all two FEMA guys. The whole time I was there, Federal Emergency Management, whatever, that we're told that it's those guys who have to manage the emergencies. He said, I saw two FEMA guys, and what they were doing is they each had a clipboard, and they were walking around taking notes. Welfare is the church's job, and I don't want to hear it. Sermon's over, I know. But I don't want to hear these people say, well, the state had to take over because the church wasn't doing a good job. Hey, you know what? And our worst day were better than you. Yeah. Stop with that nonsense. Give them an excuse to take over with the church's job. It's like they're doing good with it. It's maddening.
Church let them take it over, though.
Oh, yeah. That we did. We're still saying that. Churches are still saying that. Well, we were doing a bad job. No, we let them.
You've got Franklin Graham, who has this Operation Christmas Child and has all these people packing up boxes to send over to the poor children. And the Christians who put tracts in there have their tracts removed. So basically the church is, the big ministries like this are mocking God by even sending anything over there if they're not allowing people who want to send the physical gift to share the gospel. So, yeah, the church is the big ministries are mocking God in many cases.
Yeah, there's a book written by Marvin Olasky called Fighting for Liberty and Virtue. Talks about the difficulty of charity. Charity is just not the easiest thing to do. I might have mentioned this before, but I was involved in a church one time where a father was basically starving his children. And so the church, trying to do the right thing, wasn't going to give them money. Instead, we're buying them groceries. Sounds like the right thing to do, right? Don't give money, give them groceries so the children can eat. What do you think happened next? He's selling the groceries so he could buy alcohol. Charity is just not the easiest thing. And that's why it's got to be done locally, face to face. It's got to be done right here. There was a face-to-face situation. Even that was very difficult. Okay, we've gone to run a little over time here. I want to thank you all very much for your kind attention and insightful questions.